Hey, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are cracking open a brand new 2025 research paper to look inside a kind of crystal ball. Now, it's not for predicting the lottery, but for something way more powerful and a whole lot more dangerous: wildfires. We're going to see how scientists in Bolivia have built a totally groundbreaking new system to get ahead of the flames.
So let's start with the big question. How do you predict a wildfire? I mean, it just seems like this raw force of nature, right? Random, chaotic. But what if it's not? What if, buried inside all the data, there are actually rules they follow? This is exactly what these researchers wanted to figure out, treating fires less like random disasters and more like something we can actually see coming.
Okay, so let's get into it. The very first clue for any kind of prediction is looking for a pattern. And in Bolivia, wow, the pattern is intense. Check this out. A staggering 95% of all the energy released by wildfires happens in just 3 months: August, September, and October. That tells you right away this isn't some random year-round thing. It is a full-on seasonal assault. So knowing when to look is the first huge step.
But the patterns go way deeper than just what month it is. To really get a handle on the risk, you have to look at the land itself. It turns out wildfires don't just follow the calendar, they follow some very clear geographical rules too.
So here's rule number 1. It's all about elevation. Get this. An absolutely incredible 93% of all that fire energy is unleashed in the lowlands, below 500 meters. Just think about that for a second. That means you can pretty much ignore the high mountains, the real battleground, where almost all the danger is. It's in those sprawling, low-lying regions. That is a massive piece of the puzzle.
And then there's rule number 2. Direction really matters. You'd think a fire would just burn wherever, but nope, it actually has a favorite direction. A full quarter of all its energy gets focused on slopes that face north. And the reason for that is pretty simple. That's the way the wind blows during fire season, and it just shoves the flames right uphill. So now we know not just when to look, but where to look, and even which direction to look.
Okay, so knowing these patterns is a huge deal. But that's not the end goal. The real quest, kind of the holy grail for anybody who fights fires, is to turn all that knowledge into a tool. An early warning system that can look at tomorrow's weather and tell you today what the risk is. This quote from the paper just nails the whole mindset shift here. It's all about moving away from seeing these massive fires as just random, awful disasters that nobody can predict. Instead, they become incidents waiting to happen. In other words, they're events that we can and we absolutely should prepare for because we can see them coming. All right, so if these fires are predictable, what do you actually need to measure to build that forecast? Well, you need a recipe. The scientists tested a bunch of different combinations, and they landed on 2 key ingredients that, when you put them together, give you this remarkably accurate picture of the danger.
So ingredient number 1 is something called the Hot Dry Windy Index, or HDWI. This is your classic fire weather driver. It basically just combines wind speed with something called vapor pressure deficit, which I know sounds complicated, but it's really just a way of measuring how hot and dry the air is. The HDWI captures that immediate, right-now danger. Is the weather today just perfect for a fire to take off and spread? This index tells you yes or no.
Now, this second ingredient, this is the real game changer. It's a measure called evapotranspiration, or ETO. But you know what? Just forget the complicated name. The best way to think about it is as the thirst of the air. It's a measure of how much moisture the atmosphere has been pulling from the landscape over time. So if you have a high ETO, it means the air has been sucking moisture out of the grass, the leaves, the soil for weeks, leaving everything crispy, dry, and just ready to burn. So how does this recipe actually work day to day? It's a pretty straightforward 4-step process. First, the system just pulls in all the raw weather forecasting data: temperature, wind, and so on. Second, it calculates our 2 key ingredients, the HDWI and the ETO. Then, and this is the really crucial part, it compares today's values to the history books for that exact location. Is today's number just normal, or is it way up there in the 97th percentile, truly extreme? And based on that, step 4, it spits out a clear, simple alert level. Of course, a recipe sounds great on paper, but you have to know if it actually works in the real world, right?
So the scientists did exactly that. They put their new system through its paces, testing it against 8 years of real fire data from 2017 all the way to 2024, just to see if the forecast would have predicted the absolute worst fire days.
And honestly, the results kind of speak for themselves. On the days the system would have forecast low or moderate danger, well, pretty much nothing happened. But on those rare days, it screamed extreme danger, which is only about 4% of the time. It successfully flagged where nearly half of all the actual fire energy occurred. I mean, that is just an incredible level of precision.
The scientists even have a way to mathematically prove how good the forecast is. They use this cool concept from information theory called entropy. Just think of entropy as surprise. A bad forecast has high entropy. Fires just pop up all over the place, randomly, always surprising you. But a good forecast that has low entropy, it narrows down the danger into these predictable windows, so there's very little surprise. And this system, it has very, very low entropy. And this slide, this really gets to the heart of why this whole system works so well. It's because the two ingredients are measuring two totally different but equally critical things. The hot, dry, windy index tells you about today's weather. That's the immediate spark. But the air's thirst, the ETO, that tells you about the landscape's long-term condition. That's the tinderbox. You absolutely need both to get the full picture.
Now, this isn't just some cool academic exercise. The real power of this whole system is how it can be used on the ground. It's not just about predicting danger today, it's about looking ahead and creating a much safer future. And here it is. This might be the single most important number in this entire study: 5. The system isn't just accurate for forecasting tomorrow's danger. The research shows that it gives a reliable, actionable forecast up to 5 days in advance. 5 days. That's not just a warning. It's a window of opportunity. It is an absolute game changer.
So what can you actually do with 5 days? Well, it turns out pretty much everything. You can get public alerts out telling people, hey, maybe don't use fire for clearing land on these specific days. You can move firefighters and gear into high-risk areas before a spark ever happens. You can make way smarter decisions about where to put your resources. And maybe most importantly, you make it safer for the firefighters themselves. You get to shift from just reacting to fires to actually proactively preventing them. So in the end, this system gives us this incredible power to see danger coming. It turns what feels like a random catastrophe into something we can actually predict. But that scientific breakthrough leaves all of us with a really profound question. Knowing danger's on the way is one thing. Actually stopping it is another. With this amazing power to predict, the new challenge isn't just scientific. It's for all of us. How do we best use it to prevent a disaster?